she was in Kankakee at one point.
Oh, really?
She did a visit to the Kankakee Museum, and they have a photo of her at the museum. So anyway, so most of you know me by now, but I will remind you that I was born in New York in 1962, and then moved to Brazil when I was 4, because my father was a diplomat, and then lived there until 18. Then at 18, I moved to the United States to live with my uncle, my father's brother, who was married and had a child in Bradley. So that was my connection to Bradley. I lived there when I first moved to the US. And then my aunt passed away, my uncle moved to Florida with a 30-year younger girlfriend. Anyway, his daughter Mary went to New York, and I decided to stay in the area. I went to school at KCC, went to Oliveira, went to Chicago State University, where I did a master's degree, a double master's. And one of the seminar classes that I had to do on someone who hadn't been published yet. So I really struggled to find who to write about historically. So a friend of mine said, "Oh, you should go to the Kankakee Museum. They have an artist there." So I went there one afternoon, met this lovely lady who was the executive director of the museum, and she had a dog who followed her, and she said, "The museum is yours." I said, "I'm not even a member." She says, "Pay you $20, you're a member." So I paid $20, and she says, "Whatever you can do, whatever scholarship you can bring to George Gray Barnard, we'll be grateful. But promise that eventually we'll present the paper at the museum," and I did. So I had total access to the museum at that point. And if somebody told me that eventually I would lead their board for 11 years, I would have said, "No, that's not going to happen." But eventually I did. So I have a great love for George Gray Barnard, and tonight I will talk about him. But I will also interject about the lives of some people in Kankakee who were able to accept the gift that he gave to Kankakee Museum. Today it's called Kankakee Museum on 8th Avenue. So briefly, I'll tell you that the owner of the Kankakee newspaper, Riva Small, Riva had accepted, she received a letter from the family of George Gray Barnard and the University of Pennsylvania, offering her in the Kankakee area many studies of his that were housed at the University of Pennsylvania, and the university no longer had room for it. So she flew a friend of hers there that was working for her. He was impressed with the material, decided to come back home and said, "We need to find money to build an extension to the museum because we gotta house these artworks." So Riva was the daughter of the former governor of Illinois, Lance Small. So she had connections, plus she was the owner of the Kankakee newspaper. She was very affluent and had a lot of money. And but when I met her, she was sort of withdrawn from the community. She lived by herself. She had a caretaker. When I tried to do a live interview with her through my superintendent of schools, who was a friend of hers, I went to my superintendent and said, "Can you help me talk to Riva because I have a lot of questions for her?" And she says, "Well, I'll try," So she did, and she says, "These are the conditions. You can go, you will have 30 minutes. Your questions have to be submitted in advance, and there will be a Kankakee police officer at the house."
Oh my goodness.
This is because her son was kidnapped and assassinated. Right? He owned the Frank Lloyd Wright house today, which is under a foundation. So he was refurbishing the house at the time. I think it was 1987. Oddly enough, I met him at a party 2 weeks before. He was a super nice, very approachable man. He was in charge of the newspaper under his mother's too worked at that point. But anyway, he was called from his home this guy said there's a problem at the house and you need to come now. So he got there and they kidnapped him, put a $2 million ransom, and they took him to Pembroke, very east from here, right? Pembroke has sandy soil, so the couple that kidnapped him dug a grave that probably was 2 feet, was not very deep. They put him in a box and put a tube for him to breathe, and candy, chocolate candies for him to eat, thinking that he'll be okay. By the time they found him, he was dead. So his mom obviously had some issues of security and all that. But very, very lovely lady. She answered all my questions. She shed light on communications. So before that, the Kankakee Museum housed many other exhibits. The principal exhibit was not George Gray Barnard. There were other things that related to the history of Kankakee. So she gets the money from the government and they build. And some people tell me that she also put some of her money in it. The room is fabulous, it's a beautiful room. Most of his work is housed there. There are probably 6 pieces that are in storage within the museum because there's not enough space. And then in 2003, the hand of Lincoln was stolen. You remember that?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So the hand of Lincoln was George Gray Barnard drew a study of the hand of Lincoln. He was fascinated by Lincoln, and somebody walked into the museum and lifted a case and took the hand, and we found a day later the hand was missing. So of course, called the police, and then the police then, because it's art, the police then has to talk to the FBI. So the FBI came in, and it was a big to-do, they were investigating. And at that point, we didn't have any cameras in the room, in the art. So now we do have cameras. And I think about a year and a half later, at St. Rose Catholic Church in Kankakee, somebody came in and left a jewels bag with the hand inside, and we never knew who stole it.
Wow.
So, but the hand came back. They still have the hand. So out of the collection, there are many beautiful pieces. There is one piece that I think I have a picture here. It's a woman with a veil. She's standing like this with a veil over her head. She is about this tall. She is on a permanent loan from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And the deal is that the museum will pay for the insurance every year. So, and the insurance on that used to be $6,000. I think it might be more now. But so it's a permanent piece because it is done by him. There are other pieces of his at the Metropolitan Museum in New York, and I'll talk about that. So his early life, this rock here says Big Rock. I know it sounds silly, right? But this rock is in Riverview, district of Kankakee, the historic district. So when you drive Chicago Avenue along the river, the first house is a white house, and then you have this rock. The riverbank used to be closer to this rock, okay? But erosion has pushed the river farther. So he used to stand there and jump into the river. So this rock has a significance, because that was his rock. And he used to tell his family, I'm at the Big Rock with my friends, because he had to come down about a mile and a half from his house, where it used to be, to the river. So, okay. I like to do my talk like if it's a conversation. So if you have a question, you feel free to ask me if I have the answer, okay? All right, so important events in the United States in George Gray Barnard's first 20 years. Look at all of these things, and one of them is the Great Chicago Fire. in 1871. So the purchase of Alaska, Lincoln is assassinated. So I like to put it in perspective, like the historical time.
When was he born? Did you mention that?
No, not yet. I'll get there. So these first 20 years, that's what he contended with. Okay. So here you have George's family tree. His father was a preacher of the Presbyterian Church, and he was married to Martha Gray Grubbs. That's why he gets the Gray in his name. So George Gray Barnard was born in 1863, and he died in 1938. That was the year my mother was born, so I always remember that. He had a brother, Evan, and Evan passed away in 1938 as well. And Mary, she died at the age of 11, and Martha lived until 1928. Okay? So he married Edna Moore, and they had 2 children, Vivian and Monroe. Okay. So this was the house. He was born in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. His father married in Pennsylvania. They were originally from there. And by the age, I think the age of 9, he comes to Illinois because his father is transferred to a Presbyterian church in Kankakee. So on Court Street. So if you're familiar with Court Street, which is an extension of 17, right? And you know where Indiana Avenue, so well, you have Schuyler, which is the main division, right? And then the next one would be Indiana. This church is right on the corner of Indiana and 17. It's a beautiful church. All the windows on those churches are from Germany. It was a gift from a wealthy family in Kankakee who ordered all those churches. And I understand that church is now for sale. Yeah, it's been closed. All right. So the Reverend Barnard and his family left Bellefonte in 1866, living in Waukesha, Wisconsin, and then Kankakee, Illinois, and they moved to Muscatine, Iowa, before they settled in Madison, Indiana. So he served as minister of the Second Presbyterian Church until the early 20s. He is the church in Indiana that is considered the oldest community in Madison. So here are his parents, Martha and the Reverend. Okay? The Presbyterian Church in Kankakee had an extensive amount of sermons that I got to read, put together by Reverend Barnard. And he was quite conservative. So it's kind of interesting that George decided, I thought George would have been a farmer because the way his father was raised and wanted his son to continue their life. But George was very interested in the science. He wanted to dissect animals. So he would kill animals and then dissect them to figure out what they look like inside. There's another very famous man that used to do that, and that was Leonardo da Vinci. He used to do that. He used to kill birds, and that's how Leonardo da Vinci, I think at the age of 6, he realized there was something very special about the woodpecker in Italy. And he's like, how can this woodpecker do that and not get a headache? Or vomit, right? Because it's pecking. So he killed one, and then he took it apart. As a young boy, he took it apart and realized that the tongue of the woodpecker wraps around the brain of the woodpecker. So when he's ready to peck, the tongue envelops the brain and cushions it.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how the woodpecker is able to peck without getting hurt or suffering, because it is being protected by its own tongue. So now, 500 years later, right, Nike is already thinking about doing a helmet like that for football players, where the pressure would come from the back and then this liquid would come to the front and hold, trying to protect the brain So they're in studies right now doing that. So never know. All right, so he arrived in Kankakee in 1872. He's 9 years old. There's nothing to do in Kankakee, you know, like I said, for the river. They go fishing. In the river, there was a Kankakee hotel that eventually burned down. And the site of the hotel was almost in front of where the rock is that you saw earlier. So the family moves here and they to minister, and then George Gray left for Chicago in 1879 at the age of 16 for his art studies. So he gets to downtown Chicago and he has no place to live. So the letters that he wrote to a friend of his that you will see eventually in the presentation, he states that for the first 2 weeks he had to sleep under the stairs of the Art Institute of Chicago because they were wooden steps. So he lived down there, you know, and tried to protect himself from the elements. He studied at the Art Institute of Chicago, then called the Academy of Fine Arts, built in 1879. So there's George at the age of 9, looking like really dapper. So Harry Troop is a childhood friend, and their address is Northeast Avenue and Oak Street, Kankakee, which right now is a parking lot. See, it's a parking lot. This street up here is Port Street. This is Northwest Avenue, then Southeast Avenue, and the train tracks split Kankakee in half. So you have the east and the west. Okay. So he used to go from here probably another 6 blocks to the river to play. And Harry and he became good friends as young kids, and so did Kit. Her address was 289 South Greenwood. This house is still there. They were childhood friends. So Kit, George, and Harry. So, sorry, I'm a little discombobulated because I'm under jet lag. And I'm trying to get used to the time, and I've been waking up at 2 in the morning think it's time for breakfast. So it will take me a while before I get through that. So, the family address was 161 North Indiana, where the church is. And you can see this is the addition to the First Presbyterian Church. This was the school, where the school is located on the east side of the church, was where the rectory used to be. Okay, so they tore down the rectory to build the school. And Harry Stroop's father had a lumber yard, and I can imagine the 3 kids in the lumber yard. So on 1019 South Chicago Avenue, which is the current location, and there is the house there used to be where the lumber yard used to be. So they built this house. Okay, so here's an example of a letter. So when the executive director of the museum allowed me to go through all the letters, I had to buy my own white gloves, and I had to go through the letters. And I had to put them in chronological order because they were just thrown into boxes by the family. So the Harry family donated all the letters that they had, and now they are all chronological order. They are protected, so we'll feel really good about that. So George writes this letter to him on June 29, 1919. So World War I is just ending, right? Dear Harry, I wrote you twice without getting any answer. I hope to hear this time. When and how are you? I long to get back to old Kankakee again and intend doing this fall in October. I won't write much until I hear from you how the war has left you and yours, how many of your old schoolmates are in Kankakee? And anybody that lives in Kankakee, we don't like that K. We do K3, right? So I should like to have their names and addresses. Is Pauline Bouchard is still with you, Anna Bonfield, and Roger Sherman? It sets a great fire alight in my whole soul when I start to write their names and yours. I never heard from you after the letter of the big rock, God in heaven, how the big that rock seems now to me, to my memory. It is larger than the sun, and it is the everlasting foundation from whence eternal youth springs off into the eternal future of manhood. My affectionate regards to you, and with this, wherever you are, George Barnard. So he was very poetic. When you read the letters that he wrote to his wife, you really feel the love. He really loved her intensely. He would do anything for her. So it's really beautiful when you read in fact, I was reading some of that to the executive director. She says, that sounds like a novel to me. And I said, but it's the real thing. Look at here, some handwritten letters that he wrote. This is one of the few that they were typewritten.
What's the shadow of the penmanship behind that? What caused that?
Well, because the letters were stored on top of each other, so probably transferred. The ink transferred. Yeah, unfortunately. All right. So an excerpt from a letter to his friend Harry Troop again. It's strange to find how many of us have returned to Kankakee. I, who have lived in Europe for 18 years and seen so little of the old playground, how indelible childhood is. The years, the months, and the days, and the very hours of our own boyhood seems always have been engraved deep in my memory. Roger's little black terrier, a gang chum that chased the alley cats, is forever alive in my mind's eyes. All the streets and houses and barns and lands remain me unchanged. So he really loved Kankakee. Let's talk about his journey to success. So while living in Muscatine, Iowa, he became an assistant to a jeweler. Being an artist, so it kind of makes sense. He moved to Chicago and became an engraver for a Chicago jeweler. Barnard moves to Chicago and meets Leonard Volk, very interesting man. That Mr. Volk becomes the director of the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts in 1879. So this is now we see how he gets in, right? He also meets David Richard, another Chicago artist. While working with Mr. Volk, he became familiar with marble. For the first time in his life, he actually gets to touch a marble statue. And it changes him forever. So he enrolls in the academy, and which is today the Art Institute, in the year 1882 and 1883. So he arrives at the age of 17 and attends the Academy of Fine Arts with no money, no food. He would go to backs of the restaurants and say, you have food that I can eat, and they would give it to him. And he got to work with Leonard. Here is Leonard Wells, buried in Chicago, and this is the death mask of Lincoln that Mr. Volk got to do it. Yeah, so there are only 2 death masks. Okay, so Leonard Volk, November 7th, 1828 to August 1895. He was an American sculptor. He's notable for making one of only 2 life masks of Abraham Lincoln. In 1857, he helped establish the Chicago Academy of Design and served as its president until 1865, right after the end of the war. He made several large monumental sculptures, including the tomb of politician Stephen A. Douglas and the statue of the American Civil War figures. Okay, they're all in Chicago.
I'm wondering, this name is familiar.
Mhm.
The bust
Mhm.
in the library of Dr. Keeley, I think was done by Leonard
him?
Gold.
Oh,
It's in the museum now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
really?
It was done by him, yeah.
Oh, nice. It doesn't belong to the, to.
It's in the historical museum now, historical
Okay.
side museum. It had been in the mausoleum for years and no one was seeing it.
Okay,
And now it's, I'm pretty sure.
that's wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, hi, Mary.
That is wonderful.
I think that, I'm pretty sure it
Oh,
is.
now you're gonna drive me.
You'll have to
crazy.
come in and look.
How cool.
Yeah. Statue of who?
So here's a marble in a letter to Kankakee school children a year before his death, so 1937. He wrote, "I never saw true statue in marble until in my 20s when I arrived in Paris." So he gets some work in Chicago, save his money, and then he takes off for Paris. His family's not happy about that. And being in the Midwest, they wanted him to stay here. And this statue you see here is at the Kankakee Museum. She's a marble piece. Carrara marble, by the way. In fact, I drove on a highway last week where I saw the Carrara Mountains, where they take the marbles from it in northern Italy. It was quite interesting to see that. Okay, so in 1883, George leaves for Paris, France. So from 83 to 85, he studied at the École des Beaux-Arts in the atelier of the aging Pierre-Jules Cavalier. Pierre pronounced George as the young Michelangelo. That's big for this man to come out and say, this guy has talent. So Pierre was born in 1814, he died in 1894, and he resided in the Villa Medicis. The Medici family had a villa in Italy where he resided for many, many years. Okay? So one major connection in the art world. Another one is the Clark family. George, because of his artistic talent and the way he made people feel so special when they met, they wanted to introduce him to people with money, so they would sponsor his art, right? So, so Alfred was born on November 14, 1844 to Edward Clark, the founder of the Singer Sewing Machine Company, and he died on April 8, 1896. So he was really young when he died. One of the heirs to the Singer Clark Sewing Machine fortune. My mother owned a Singer sewing machine. I bet many of you.
You never heard it called the Singer Clark though.
No, not Clark. Yeah, just Singer.
Just
Right?
Singer, yeah.
So Alfred Corning Clark led the dual life: a quiet family man in America and a gay athlete in Europe, especially in France, which he declared the Mecca of brotherly feelings. He was a generous patron to male artists for 19 years. His closest companion was a Norwegian tenor named Lorenz Severin Skogard. When his father's death forced him to return to Manhattan, Alfred installed Skogard's down the block from the townhouse where he lived with his wife and children. So very common at this point in history for, homosexual men or to just have those connections. Wife is in one country there. So in the Kankakee Museum, we have actually two studies of Alfred and Skogard. He wanted, when Skogard died in Norway, he wanted a monument for for the cemetery. So it's actually, there's one on display, you can see. And the other one is another study, but a little smaller, that's in the back room. It's actually, if you pay attention, there are two men hugging each other this way. So it's almost like they're trying to come out of the rock, but it's made out of plaster. Okay? So kind of most people think, oh, it's a brotherly love, right? But most of us that know the connection with the two of them becomes more significant, and here it is.
Oh,
See? Yeah. So he became Barnard's benefactor for 10 years, lots of money. Barnard could eat and could take care of himself. And thanks to Clark, is able to move to a better apartment in Paris. And he makes his first major commission, a memorial to the Norwegian poet, a friend of Alfred, and the subject is brotherly love. Okay, let's talk about the Rockefellers. So, in a party, he is introduced to John Rockefeller, okay? And of course, a businessman, a philanthropist, and that this connection is coming to a point where Rockefeller is making so much money, he's buying properties in New York, in a city, but he's also buying in a country, and he had just built a mansion in a country, and he wants the driveways and the front of the mansion to be decorated by Barnard. So Barnard agrees, okay? So he donated over $537 million in various philanthropic causes. There was a long financier and a vast 14-building real estate complex, which is now the Rockefeller Center, right? But he had a house in the country, and the house in the country was the project of George Gray Barnard. He wanted a fountain. The fountain was built. If you pay attention here, his anatomy is covered, but that was not done by George Gray Barnard, it was done by somebody else. George had him anatomically correct Adam and Eve, and Rockefeller saw it, he says, I can't have that, I just can't have that, so cover him up. And George got mad at him and they walked away. He walked away from their money because he was not willing to cover it up. And so he thought it was censorship and he felt bad about it, which in essence was, right? So Adam and Eve fountain in the residence in Pontiac, New York. It took 6 years to complete the fountain. At that time, 1925, $150,000. So
What was that made out of?
marble. Yes, yeah, Carrara marble that brought from Italy here. So one of the most controversial creation of his. In 1896, Alfred dies at the age of 51. Clark states donate the True Natures, which was presented at the Salon in Paris, to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. So this piece is a fabulous piece. It's beautiful. In fact, I stood there. I thought the museum might ask me to leave because they might be thinking this guy's plotting to take this out of here. Right? It is really beautifully done. The muscles, the veins there in marble. So they donated to the Metropolitan. So there, I think there are 6 pieces of his at the Metropolitan New York. The same year, Barnard has his first exhibit in New York, but his reception was far less enthusiastic than the Salon in Paris. So he was a little disappointed that his own people didn't recognize his talent or felt it was not so important.
So how big is something like that?
I did what?
How big is it?
This piece?
Yes.
I would say 10 feet tall. Yeah, it's beautiful.
More
yeah,
than
it's-
life size.
More so, yes.
Is he still living in Paris when is he still in Europe when he's doing these?
The exhibit in New York? No, when he was doing the statues. No, he was in New York.
Okay.
Yeah, he's now in New York. Okay. The Great God Pan by George Gray Barnard, 1899, near Lewinson Hall, is a gift of the Clarks, the son of Alfred. In 1907, it's a bronze granite base, 6 feet, by 64 inches by 11 and 9.5 inches. So it's another unusual piece, but beautiful nonetheless. And he didn't use marble for that. Charles Phelps Taft the First. He was the oldest brother or half-brother of President William Howard Taft. And he was an American lawyer, a politician, and an art collector. He meets George Gray Barnard in a reception, and George didn't think much of him, and in the letters he even thought that he didn't think the guy could read. Okay? So, but nonetheless, they're having this conversation. Taft married Anna Sinton in 1873, who was the heiress to a big iron fortune left by her father, David Sinton, and he owned the Chicago Cubs from 1914 to 1916. So he commissions a statue of Lincoln. So here you see the statue. The statue is in Cincinnati. So nationally renowned artist George Gray Barnard took nearly 5 years to complete the 11-foot sculpture. It was unveiled to the public, sharply criticized his interpretation of Lincoln with his oversized hands and feet and gaunt, beardless face. Today, the work is one of the most eloquent representations of humanity of the 16th U.S. president. The sculpture in the federal-style home at the end of the Little Park, now the Taft Museum, were gifts for the people of Cincinnati by the daughter of Taft. So the day this was unveiled, Robert Lincoln is there. And Robert Lincoln throws a fit. He screams on the top of his lungs, get this down, this is horrible, this is not my father. Because Lincoln, in this statue, looks very much like a farmer, like a worker, right? And what got Robert so upset was mostly the shoes that his father was wearing, because it was a square front shoes. And he said, people, you know, they're poor, wear flat shoes in the front. My father wasn't poor, so he was worried about the status of his father. And from then on, Robert Lincoln made his life goal to destroy George Gray Barnard. He did everything he could. He talked bad about him, he called people not to give him money, not to support him. I mean, he did every kind of sabotage he could to destroy George Gray Barnard. Very sad. Isadora Duncan. We all know how she died, right? You know?
With the scarf.
With the scarf. She had a long scarf in a car, and the scarf here was flying, and it caught in the wheel, and it killed her. So, Isadora Duncan was an American dancer, and she is introduced to George Gray Barnard. Okay? And they are living in the same group of friends with the Rockefellers. They're all hanging together. So he meets his wife now, Edna Moore. So the 30-year-old artist met and fell in love with Edna Moore, a young woman from Boston studying violin in Paris. They got married in 1895. Same year, George Gray Barnard presented 6 pieces to the Salon, and they were all accepted. So the Salon, I'll just remind you, is an annual show in Paris where you can submit art pieces, and about 80% of the art pieces are not accepted. Okay? In fact, Picasso presented one and was rejected the first time. Okay? And it took I think like 3 or 4 times before they accepted his pieces. George Gray Barnard presents 6, and they took all 6. This is the caliber of artistic He becomes a sensation in Paris, and he was admitted as an associate member of the Société Nationale of the Arts. Now, 1906, he had all of that success in Paris. He tries to bring that success to the U.S. And the Capitol building in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, you know, the home of his birth, right? Now knows about him, and they want to create 2 art pieces that are going to be at the entrance of the Capitol. So there are 2 sides, and they wanted him to carve these pieces out of Carrara marble. And so he does the work. So he's told of the scandal and the misuse of funds in the Capitol project. All payments stopped. So he takes the commission, and they say something's wrong, somebody's stealing money, and he had to stop. And November 1910, Barnard ships the marbles by freight to America from Italy, from northern Italy, from the Carrara Mountains. And today, if you were to buy the piece of marble that they bought, which was 5 tons, yeah, 2 pieces of 5 tons, a total of 10 tons of marble, it would be a little bit over $4 million for the marble. Not the transportation, that's even more, okay? Because it has to come by ship. All right, so October 4th, 1911 was designated Barnard Day in Pennsylvania, and they were all excited. President Theodore Roosevelt, upon viewing the work, said, "I am proud of this work, proud, thrice proud." So he was really happy to see the work. And here it is. All Carrara marble, very dramatic. I think 2004, this was cleaned, and I believe it was Pepsi-Cola who paid for the cleaning. So, yeah, too bad I don't drink Pepsi. So, anyway, very dramatic pieces. He was very theatrical, obviously. Okay. So here you can see the entrance to the building, and those are the 2 sets of so at the entrance is flanked by 2 sculptures, The Unbroken Law and The Burden of Life. The Unbroken Law, both were sculptured out of Carrara marble, models created by George in 1909. So he would do a small marble, a small cast model, and then it would be approved. Once they got approved, then he would work with the marble. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about he was living in Paris. So he's living in Paris, he's busy, he has financing from people in Paris, but also from the US, and he now has a little bit of time for himself. So he takes holidays into the countryside. So he went to Provence, for example, and he would ride a bicycle. Whether it was rainy or sunny, he would ride a bicycle. And he began to see that the ground was uneven, but because there was something under the dirt, under the earth that was covering things. So one day, it was raining quite a bit. He started taking the rainwater and trying to wipe away to see what it was, where it was a medieval statue. And he's like, I wonder how many more statues are around here, right? So that's what he does. He spends time with a Frenchman, and they start collecting these pieces. So he would go into farms. So let's say you have a farm, and your ancestors used 2 statues to make a bridge over a brook, right? So he would say, I'll get you the wood, but let me take these statues. So he would take the statues. And it was a great way of preserving so many of the medieval artifacts that were destroyed by the Catholic Church and by other Protestant churches. So with that, he accumulated so much that let's see, George began collecting medieval objects to sell and as well for his own collection. He sold a few because, you know, he needed to get a way to get some of these pieces back to Paris. And then like storage, where do I put these pieces, right? So he visited Dijon, Toulouse, and the most outstanding cloisters of Saint Michael de Bouchard. In 1916, Barnard supervises the building of a new museum called the Cloisters. So if you go to Metropolitan Museum, you walk maybe 3/4 of a mile, and then there are the cloisters. Okay, those were built in 1916. In 1925, Barnard sold the great part of his collection to the Rockefeller. So he calls the Rockefeller family and say, I have all of these beautiful pieces, and I don't want to go to museums in Europe. They should come to America. So the Rockefellers buy the collection. He becomes quite wealthy from that, and is able to work at his pace without relying on benefactors. So today is one of the most fabulous collections in New York City. If you go to New York City, please go to the Metropolitan and to the Cloisters, because they are fabulous what they have in there. And the current building housing the Cloisters today was dedicated in 1938, a few weeks after he died. So he got to see it put together. But so this stained glass window here, you see, was hand painted in the Middle Ages, and he found it because a lady said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm collecting any artwork," and she says, "Oh, I have this glass. Do you want it?" He said, "Sure, I'll take it." So it's in New York now. And see, you have effigies of tombs that he was able to salvage. These were people had been buried in there during the Middle Ages, and the French government was too busy, didn't pay attention to that. So
Did
thanks
they
to
bury
George.
him, or did they bury him so someone else wouldn't get them?
No, I think they were used, from what I understand from the letters, is that they were used sometimes broken in pieces to like patch houses.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah, they would patch a house with that, or like they would build a bridge. They'll take this effigy, flip it, like he found many that were flipped, and then when he goes underneath, he says, "Oh, there's an effigy here." So he would lift it. Yeah, so how cool of him, right? But they built in a very style of the Romanesque, and so they would all fit in that building just right. So it's nice what money can do, right? Rockefellers hired the right architects, and they built everything for the location.
And France never wanted it back?
They might have wanted, but they're not giving it. I'm sure there had been some discussions, but it's just like you go to the Parthenon, for example. The Parthenon now has a new museum, right? They built in the early 2000s. And you go through the museum, and then you get to a big room, and you look up, and there is one piece of a frieze, and then missing pieces, and then another piece. Well, that's because the British stole that as the spoils of war. So the frieze decoration of the Parthenon is actually in the British Museum in London. So if you want to see it, you got to go to the British Museum. So that's what we did last time we went to see that, because we had been to Athens and realized it was missing. And inside of the museum in Athens, they have a petition where they're asking people to sign their names because they're going to send it to the Queen. Well, they did send it to the Queen, and the Queen says, "Well, we were thankful for the request, but no, you're not getting those because they're spoils of war, right?" So makes me think of Scott Pelley from CBS. He did an interview a couple years, well, maybe 5 years ago, at the museum in St. Petersburg, and then he went to Moscow to the Hermitage, asking for certain paintings that he wanted to look at it. So the Russian government says, you can come, they bring a crew. So he goes in with the crew and he's doing the interview, and he asks the director of the museum, you know, I'm looking for this painting. Do you have this? It was a Picasso. He says, yeah, we do. Do you have this one? Well, these are all paintings that were stolen during World War II, primarily from Jewish families. So he says, the guy says, I'll show you. Do you want to see it? He says, sure. They go to the basement, they pull out the racks, and there they are. And he's like, the families would like to get this back together. He says, no. Shove it back in. He says, these are the spoils of war. But they're not even displayed for people to see. That's so sad, you know? All right, so the Cloister collection contains approximately 5,000 European medieval arts, work of art with a particular emphasis on pieces dating from the 12th century and the 15th centuries. Notable works of architecture include the Cuixhave cloister with an adjacent chapter house and the Frudolentenia apse from the chapel in Provence in the province of Segovia and Castilla y Leon. So that's where Princess Isabella comes from. So the works from her family. Among the works of art are 7 Flemish tapestry depicting the hunt of the unicorn, Robert Campin Merode altarpiece, that is unbelievable, beautiful. The Romanesque altar cross, known as the Cloister Cross or Bury St. Edmund's Cross, which was acquired under the cureship of Thomas Houling. The cloisters also hold many medieval manuscripts and illuminated books, including the Limburg's brother Le Bel Huet du Caux and the Jean Parcet books of Hours. All those books are on display for you to see. They're beautiful. So not only did he salvage architectural pieces from the farms in the areas, but he also went into the homes and was able to buy from them and help some of those families that needed the money at the time. Let's see. So here, George is awarded the Chevalier de Legion of Honor by the French government. This is a huge honor for anyone in France, let alone an American, receiving that. So he was always very, very proud of that. Okay, we have one last, and then I'll give you a couple more things that I did not put on my. So he dies on April 24th, 1938, at the Columbia Medical Hospital in New York. He had a massive heart attack that killed him. He was working on a statue of Abel betraying his brother Cain when he fell ill. He's buried at Harrisburg Cemetery, Pennsylvania. As you can see, it's a very simple, it just says George Ray Barnard and the date of birth and the year of death. That's it. So other pieces that never materialized, unfortunately, but the Kankakee Museum owned the models in its size, okay, the original size that would have been. Because it would have been marble, but the money ran out. And they were going to be in New York City, part of it into Central Park. And so you have a memorial for World War I soldier, and then you have other stylistic figures of men and women, like you would see in a Greek temple, sort of that kind of idea. Kankakee owns 6 of those. So before he dies, he leaves a will and testament where all the artwork was to be given to the University of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and stay there. With the letters, the manuscripts, everything went to them. Well, the university realized they didn't have enough room, and they thought, either we sell it or we find some connection out there. Well, they send a letter to River Small, and they say, we understand he lived in your town. Would you be interested in these beautiful artworks and archives? And she said, absolutely. So she paid for for this guy to go and look at it, and he looked at it, he called her, and he said, we need to acquire this, we need to find room for this. This is important for Kankakee. So when it came to Kankakee, in fact, a good friend of mine, she's 86 years old, she just recently admitted to me that she was a child when the collection came to Kankakee, and it was initially housed at the old school, which was a school from grades 1 all the way through high school. And this school was located south of the courthouse. So you know where the courthouse is on Main Street? You go a block south, there's a parking lot there now, and then the jail further down, right? So where the parking lot was the school. And these statues, there were no places to store it because the museum wasn't built yet. So they put these statues in the basement and in the attic of the old school. Well, the kids were very curious. So they would peek through the keyhole and look, because the ladies' breasts were showing. And at that point, the anatomically correct nail was there, and they were very curious. So the school figured it out, because I want to go to the bathroom. So they peeked. And she says, I was one of those. So she admitted to me, so it was fun. The collection was there, and then the courthouse said, we will take it because we're afraid that the leak might be leaks in the roof, and it will destroy the plaster, right? So they moved that to the courthouse basement. It was there for about 12 years, and then I know the name of this judge, but I was told never to say his name, so he's gonna die with me. The only one that knows is Bill. So this judge had a daughter who was having her sweet 16, and they lived near the river. They had a big lawn, and they wanted to decorate the lawn. So what do? They pick statues from the basement of the courthouse to the lawn and put it all over the lawn, and it rained.
Oh my God.
So we don't have about 8 pieces, right? It's gone. Then from there they were moved to the museum, and the guy that did that, Don Delorier, which was a friend of Riva. Don Delorier, I met him once. He seemed like a really nice guy, and Don told me at the time, and I was not even really that interested in George Ray Barnard at the time, but he told me, he says, the people in this town will never know that myself and my father would put some of the statues in wheels and go down from the courthouse on Indiana Avenue, one holding the statue from the back as they go down the hill, right? But they had to do it at night because they couldn't cover them and they were naked. So during the day there was a no-no, that would never happen. So that's how they brought most of the collection to the museum, and it is stored now there. So when I became president of the board, my first wish was to catalog all the artwork. So I have a friend who is a photographer. She agreed to take all the pictures to the museum and offer to the museum. So now they're all cataloged. There's a history to each piece. So I'm really proud of the work that we did that. And it's still there. And I say, if you go to Kankakee, please go there and take a look at his marvelous work. There is I'll share this with you guys because this is kind of fun. So when I was president, the executive director and I used to talk all the time. So she calls me and she says, we got a problem. I said, oh God, don't tell me something's stolen, right? She says, no, come on. So I went over there, we met in the office, and so we have a statue, well, it's an unfinished statue of Face of Lincoln. So it's piece of marble this wide, about this narrow, and his face was being carved. So it looks like he's trying to come out of the rock, right? He's trying to breathe or something. It's really beautiful, very heavy. Well, that piece, a great nephew of George Gray Barnard said, we want that piece that belongs to the family. So we're like, well, I said, we belong to the family, we don't know. So we went through all of the documents, and it doesn't say that belongs to the family. So we have a lawyer. I believe in lawyers in boards.
Yes.
Yeah. So I called my lawyer that night. I said, hey, this is happening. What do we do? He says, stall it. Just don't answer it. We gotta think. So anyway, he called back in a week, and then I was there for the call. So, no cell phones yet. So we were just talking, and so I said to him, I said, it would be, I said, why is the piece so important? There are so many other pieces, right? Other pieces are cast, plaster. This is marble. So there are two marbles, the girl and this Lincoln. And he says, well, it belongs to the family. I think we should have it in a house. They wanted to sell it. And our insurance that had insured each individual piece came to the conclusion that the Lincoln was worth $400,000. So I'm like, I hate to give that back. So in talks, two more phone calls, we were able to convince him that it belonged in Kankakee. He says, oh, please don't take it. The children, me as a teacher, like the children need to see Lincoln in Illinois, So he left us alone and didn't pursue anymore. So it's still there. But another interesting thing, and in fact, Bill and I drove all the way to Cairo, Illinois, not Cairo, right? It's
Not
Cairo.
It's Carol, just like the syrup.
Okay, so I learned that when I was there, because they called me a Yankee down there.
Other things,
I am a Yankee, but not that way, right? I'm from Rio, Brazil. But anyway, because that is the confluence of the rivers, right? In the States, there were a lot of merchants there at one point in the history of Cairo. And the daughter of a very wealthy merchant talked to George Gray Barnard into doing a statue. And George says, well, I'm making a statue for the St. Louis World Fair, and I would be glad to sell you that after the World Fair is over. Let's see, if it's a success or not. So she agreed, and he did what is called the hewer. And it's a boy stepping on 2 or 3 pieces of wood, and he's like trying to build something. It's a beautiful action piece of a young boy. It's lovely. It's beautiful. It's made out of. We have one copy of plaster at the museum. So when you go there, you'll see the copy of plaster. But this one is made out of bronze, and
Where is it?
it's in a plaza, in a little street, in a pedestal.
In Carol?
In Cairo, yeah,
Wow.
sitting there. So I drove all the way there. I said, Bill, we gotta go down there and take a look at this. So we drove there. We got there. I parked my car, and then I walk around with my camera, taking pictures. And the police came. He says, I got a call. People are wondering what you're doing. And I said, well, I've studied this artist, and so I explained, very nice, very nice. So I told him a few things, and I said, he said, so what do you think? I said, I'm about ready to cry. I said, somebody painted this statue with black oil paint.
Oh, no.
I said, this will take a restoration of at least $200,000. Says it may protect the metal, but it's horrible, Oh, he says, said, the mayor told us to do that.
Oh,
Oh, yeah. So I'm like, oh, that's so sad. And I said, you know, if you guys don't want the statue, I'll take it, you know. And he's like, oh, I don't know. We have to put something back in there. And I'm like, oh, this is a thought. So it was always my thinking to go back and have a meeting with them and say, this statue really should come to Kankakee and we'll take care of it. Because we have enough people in Kankakee with money that would pay to restore it. I'm pretty confident.
I'm surprised it lasted in Carroll as long as it has.
Yes.
Somebody hasn't carted it off.
So sad, but he's there and he's beautiful, dedicated to this young girl's father. It's a nice plaque, the plaque's still there. So, and then Bill and I drove to Cincinnati, Ohio to see the Lincoln. And the Lincoln is very impressive, it's beautiful. And I don't understand why Robert would be so upset over Lincoln. But,
Robert he was a strange man.
yeah, he was not very nice.
No.
Yeah.
Terrible to his mother.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So, the letters are at the museum. We have a wonderful collection of George Ray Barnard. And on Wikipedia is also listed. Kankakee is listed, you know, as a tribute to him. So, I ask you, if you go to Kankakee, add another hour and go see the museum. And I think to go into the museum is $2.
Now, where is it?
Where is it? Yeah.
On 8th Avenue.
8th Avenue.
So you're coming in, you're going into Kankakee on 17. Let's see, you take Station Street.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you take Station Street, you go Curtis, which is a long street that crosses. Take Curtis, and then you will see a school, an elementary school. Take a left. At the end of that street is the museum.